I'm sounding like Jesse. Welcome to Real Monsters, another Thursday night episode. I'm your host, S.K. Barrett, and joining me is the ever lovely and talented Wes Hobrick.
Hello, hello, hello.
And we are going to talk about our first year podcast.
Yep, pretty
Um,
much.
I mean, it's kind of close. We started in January last year, so yeah, why not?
Oh, yeah, that's right, we did. I was having trouble remembering the exact month, but yeah,
God, can you believe we've been doing this a year?
I can't. But man, it's been fun. I've enjoyed myself.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
It absolutely has. And keeping up the Facebook page, too, which if y'all haven't gone over there on facebook.com/Real Monsters Podcast, give us a like or a follow.
Yeah. All right. So, um, we got a, we made a lot of shows this year. I mean, more or less once a week. I mean, there were some missing weeks in there. Um,
Yeah, as life tends to do, when one of us has an emergency or what have you.
or a holiday or whatever.
Yeah,
Or
or a
illness,
holiday.
that kind of thing. We had some gaps, but uh, God, we did a lot of shows. And so I'd kind of like to go back and talk about the Black Dahlia because I think that's where we started.
It was. Um, and her anniversary is actually coming up January 14, 1947, when they found the body bisected and with a Glasgow smile carved into it, which is where they slit the lips from ear to ear in a housing area of Los Angeles. And then you have, of course, the whole theory that we touched on in that episode about her being sort of a failed art piece of a surrealist.
Right. That was a whole thing. Plus the fact that there were um, these children of this doctor who said that their dad was the killer.
Dr. George Hodel and one of his kids, Steve Hodel, was a homicide detective in the LAPD, and he said he thought his dad did it. Um,
Man,
so
how
yeah,
weird would that be?
yeah, I can't even imagine. Although they already had a really fractured relationship because of the incest that happened between Hodel and one of his daughters, Fauna. So
And
um,
didn't the son even speculate that his dad might have been Zodiac?
I think that might have been somebody separate,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken, who said that was a possibility. But um, yeah, those two are so far removed, I just couldn't see it, you know?
Right.
Zodiac and then Elizabeth Short's murder, the Black Dahlia. But I do find the surrealism angle very interesting because
Yeah.
Dr. Hodel would have had the surgical knowledge to bisect the body in so brutal a manner.
And
Basically dump
it,
her out there. And he was friends with Man Ray, the
okay.
artist, which
Right.
Hodel himself was a failed artist. So,
Oh man, so many, so much, so much brutality in the world could have been prevented from if people had been successful artists, certain people.
this is true. Absolutely. Um, Timothy Olson in the chat. We're talking about the Black Dahlia at the moment, Timothy. Yeah, they never solved it definitively, but I think, for my money, George Hodel is probably your best suspect with the Dahlia.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody else has been, you know, I think the son makes a very strong case.
Yeah.
And Jesus Christ, if your son thinks you're guilty, that's rough, man.
Well, if your homicide detective son
Yeah, right.
thinks you're guilty, it's even more exceptionally rough. So, yeah, and absolutely. Um, Man, that is actually not Hodel on the screen right now. I'm trying to.
What? Who
I
was
think
that?
that guy was one of the suspects. One of
Okay.
the other suspects. I can't
You know
remember
what?
the
I
name.
just making these slideshows. I just grabbed a handful of the pictures we had for the show. I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't look that closely at them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so who else
Yeah.
is interesting to you?
Um. Well, not quite off of Dahlia yet. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
think they ever did use DNA, Timothy, with that one. There
Yeah,
probably wouldn't have been any on the body though, because
it
it's
was
most
cleaned.
likely that, yeah, it's most likely that she was bisected in a bathtub somewhere, and then the body washed before they put it out. So, um, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the answer,
as rudimentary as the forensic capabilities of police at the time, uh, Dr. Hodel
mhm.
would have been cognizant of, trying to remove any kinds of evidence.
Yeah, I mean, he would have probably known about fingerprints for one. That probably would have kept him worried, but it's almost a necessity too that you would have to do it in a bathtub if you're going to transport it somewhere because of the amount of blood
Right.
involved with something like that. I mean, that would be difficult to get off of. So, yeah, definitely. But I think the one that sticks out for me after all of this, getting back to it, is Herb Baumeister, um,
Ooh.
the bisexual serial killer out of Indianapolis. Um, and he may very well be the I-70 Strangler, too. There's speculation about that, but Baumeister killed himself before they could apprehend him, drove to Toronto, and put a bullet in his head. Um, I actually, about maybe, what was it, 6 to 7, maybe even 8 months after we did the episode,
Yeah.
I was contacted by a guy I went to college with in
Really?
Southern Illinois who I hadn't seen for years. And he actually spent time in Indiana around where this happened, and he actually knew Baumeister's kids.
No kidding.
No kidding. And he had a couple of things, a couple of details that the general public's not going to know about this. He was talking about, for one, that one time when they had a sleepover at the Baumeister residence at Fox Hollow Farm, where we just had the sign up for it,
Right?
which is this huge, sprawling estate because Baumeister was a businessman. He owned a series of thrift shops in the area, him and his
Yeah.
wife.
There's the
So they
house
were,
now.
oh
It's a big
man, mine's
house.
not loading.
I mean,
Yeah, there we go.
it's a shitty Tudor style, but it's a big house.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember the square footage, but yeah,
It's substantial. It's 3 levels.
yep. But yeah, he says that they were over there at the time, and I was just flipping through my phone here to bring up the screenshots of the conversation we had so I don't miss any details. But they were there at the time for a sleepover.
Okay.
And this is about when all of them were in high school. And apparently, my friend and a few others of them woke up to see Baumeister staring at them as they're sleeping.
Whoa.
So yeah,
Whoa. You
I mean,
know, this is and this is the kind of guy that the title of this podcast is aimed at. Um,
Mhm.
and it's the people who seem like regular, ordinary people who are the real monsters. The people,
Mhm.
that everybody thinks they're going to be able to tell who the creepers are, and you can't always.
Yeah, and you absolutely can't. But yeah, we have actually another one like that, Dennis Rader, that we'll be talking
Yeah,
about too.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
like I said, I was looking for this convo in here and keeping his name out of it. But here's the info he gave me, and like I said, suffice it to say, he's somebody I trust a lot. I knew him
Okay.
pretty well when I went to school with him. But he says, I know people who stayed at his house at Fox Hollow Farm. Um, let's see, and then me, and correct anything I may have gotten wrong, referring to the show. My friend, I grew up in Westfield with his uber creepy son, Eric. Um, when Baumeister was alive, my question, he says yes. They woke up watching them.
Oh, the father and the son?
Apparently, yeah.
Whoa.
It was a sleepover party, and my question, so literally watching them sleep. My friend, yes. Me, wow. And of course, they had no idea he was a serial killer, no clue. Just 13-year-olds, my friend says, having fun.
Jesus.
But let's see. And then I said, wow, just 13. My friend, some new weird things were going on. When his son brought the skull, I asked a lot of questions. He brought a skull to his high school. People told me I was being dumb, my friend says. He claimed it was Native American. I told him no way it was old. I say, wow. His father, my friend, his father reminded me of creepy Nazi. My friend is Jewish.
Oh,
I
yeah.
told people he looked evil. He wore white a lot and a Bahama hat. He flaunted his wealth and his influence. He threw the cops off by appearing to be the rich bougie bourgeoisie type of person the town wanted to attract. I say he did, my friend. The town was growing and trying to project an elitist image. People were charmed by him. Um, a few were creeped out by his smiles, including me. And the turning point was Eric bringing the skull.
Jesus.
Oh, I'm not quite done either. It became very divisive. People who really liked him rallied around him and bullied us. Matt Campbell, I'm not sure who that was his best friend, another snob, who slept at his house a lot. Tons of times he must have seeked out help afterwards. The school never talked about it. They never did counseling. My friend, it was like Chernobyl, contained the spread of information. And it, referring to the town, never came to terms with it. It was rarely discussed. They did. He also points out they didn't want housing values to go down. Kind of interesting
Oh,
there.
God.
Uh,
I got so much. There's so many fucking people who are so worried about appearances instead of protecting people and seeking proper justice for things. It really pisses me off. And it's not just the cops, obviously. So it's the town council and shit like this. It's just like the fucking mayor in Jaws, Oh, the beaches will be open. We don't care how many fuckers get eaten.
hmm Yeah, it really is. And I think you get it a lot with the superficial people that kind of surrounded Baumeister too and ran in his circle.
Yeah.
But Baumeister's dad, to remind people, was a successful doctor in the area. And he said, my friend says about that, also his father, the doctor, knew something was deeply wrong with his son. We
Mm.
don't know why. We don't know how. Also, his brother died mysteriously found dead in a similar manner as Baumeister's victims. Another part I didn't know.
Wow.
So, however, Baumeister never murdered people he knew that people would look for. Never a high-risk victim,
Like a
as they
sibling.
would classify it. Yeah, or like, let's say, a child. Um, he selected the gay scene for a reason. He may have been a closeted bisexual. I think there's no doubt about that. It's my friend talking. However, I think he just did that to lure in a population he did not think anyone would care about. So that's interesting. I think he's essentially saying using his sexuality as a sort of cover there. Um,
Oh, that's
but
wild.
yeah. But his fetish was way more edgy, and to remind people, it's um, asphyxiation. He would strangle and drown his victims in the pool there. Not really understood, my friend talking about his fetish. What is the most disturbing was how the narrative was carefully controlled, and how much the Hamilton County Police uh, covered up, or screwed up, my apologies. Like I said, I'm reading off the screenshots here. He
Well,
got sloppy as his ego grew. He
well,
was
that's
narcissistic.
that's typical, of anybody. As we've talked about before, when you get away, the more you get away with something, the more you think you will always get away with something.
Yeah, I
And that's
definitely
true of
agree.
everybody.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And it really is, and I think it's exceptionally true when you're looking at like detective work too, because most of these guys end up getting caught when they make a mistake.
Right.
It's not like you have clever Sherlock Holmes type on their ass and outthinks them. No, it's when they totally fuck up on something.
Which we'll cover when we talk about Bundy, because that's totally how he got caught
Oh,
both
absolutely.
times.
Actually, we will cover it with Raider too,
Yeah.
with the end of that. But
The concept of the criminal genius is vastly overstated. It's just a cinematic ploy, a trope. In the real world, it really doesn't exist.
oh, absolutely. No, it doesn't really at all. Um, which, although I think if we were to get close to it, it would probably be out of the people we've covered, H.H. Holmes.
Yeah, that might be as close as you'll ever get. That guy was,
um,
I mean, yeah, come on. That guy,
yeah,
he had just,
yeah, he.
Jesus, the balls on that guy.
Oh yeah. And once you think about it, he's kind of the archetype of that too.
Do you
When
want
you think
to,
of
should
like
we just
the
switch over to Holmes?
yeah, that's fine. I'm actually done with the screenshots. So, uh, yeah, I mean, he was also kind of the archetype of it because when you think about it, like in silent movies, when you see the guy with the handlebar mustache that he plucks and the, black thing over his eyes and
Right.
dressed in all black, the villain archetype. That's kind of what I think of when I think of Holmes, because he even kind of looks like that, you know? And it would have been almost his time period.
Yeah, I mean, I okay, so I think there's like one other case that I'm aware of where somebody built a structure specifically for murder, and it was at one of these roadside motels, but it was actually more for peeping at the guests and not actually murdering them.
Hmm.
But
Kind of a,
Holmes
yeah,
actually built an entire three-story structure for
he
murder.
did. He did in my state, in Illinois, in Chicago, for the World's Fair
Yeah.
in 1893.
and he would, and I mean, this guy was astonishing.
Mhm.
I mean,
Oh,
he would, and he had a lot of charm, and he would weasel his way into people's lives, then take over their assets, and then kill them. I mean, it was
yeah.
just as, and he just kept doing more, and he was a fraud. He, it was just he insurance fraud and all this shit. He was just going on and on and on in every possible way. It was incredible.
Oh, yeah. And he was. He's so. And he's compulsive when it comes to crime, you know? He's ruthlessly analytical, but I don't think he ever would have stopped. He never could have
No,
stopped,
no,
even if he wanted
there
to.
was no, why would he stop? He's obviously derived a great deal of benefit out of doing I mean, Jesus Christ, who builds a house, a hotel for murder if they don't like it?
Hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, it's so much of that, too. Man, it was. That place had actually burnt down not long after they discovered it. It's kind of a tragedy, too. You know, it'd be interesting to just like tour a place like that
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
know it
it is
exists.
unfortunate that it's gone, but because yeah, that would have been quite the thing to study.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Man, it's just amazing. But yeah, Martin Scorsese and I think it was Leonardo DiCaprio bought the movie rights or the TV series rights for the book Devil in the White City, which is all about Holmes and the World's Fair. So that'll be interesting to see when it comes out. Eric Larson wrote it. Kelly, you're in the comments, and I know this is one of your favorites.
Yeah,
Did
Kelly
you,
was on
out of
that episode.
curiosity?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was. Did you have anything you wanted to add there? And I was going to ask as well if you had heard a date about when they were going to be starting. I don't think they've even started production on the movie or TV version of Devil in the White City, but um, yeah, and it'd be really cool to see when it's out. And yeah, Timothy, the hotel itself, like we said, burnt down. I don't think there's anything on that lot where it was in Chicago now, but I could be wrong about that. Um, not thoroughly sure. I could look while we're talking about other stuff too, though. The Murder Castle.
Yeah, that's, I mean, as far as a serial killer genius, this guy's about as close as you get. Um, some get away with it for longer, some for less, but very few have such an organized approach to it. I
Yeah,
mean,
he was
it was a fucking
ruthlessly
murder
analytical.
factory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I think would have made the Nazis kind of jealous. And I would be surprised if they hadn't studied it when they were looking at doing
Oh,
like the camps and setting up the final solution. It's
that,
too bad I don't still have my book on Heydrich, who was the architect of that. I could have checked, but yep. Oh, Kelly says the production keeps getting put back for some reason. Insurance? Well, maybe. Gotta be. I hope they get further with that.
usually it's distribution.
I don't think that. I can't imagine that would be a problem with Scorsese, though.
Well,
Uh,
distributors want what they want. And it's a little known fact um, that the distribution companies really control what gets seen and what gets made and how it gets made.
mm-hmm.
The smart production companies like um, Opie, you know,
Hmm.
what's his name?
Ron Howard?
Ron Howard and Brian Glazer. Um,
Uh-huh.
they take their concepts to the distribution companies first, and then once they get an okay from the distribution companies, they can take that agreement to the bank and get a loan against it.
Oh, there you go.
So,
It's an
which
interesting
is
idea.
different than, yeah, a lot of indies, they will produce their film and then try and find a distributor. But the smart
Hmm.
guys, they go to the distributor first.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
there you go.
yeah. So if there's a problem with distribution, if they're doing a movie for theatrical release, if there's a
Hmm.
problem, it's typically with distribution.
Interesting. I can't remember if it was that or I want to say it was one of the streaming platforms that they
Okay.
might be doing that for. That's why I couldn't
That
remember
changes
whether
that
it was
changes the dynamic considerably.
yeah, that's why I couldn't remember as well if it was TV, if it was a series they were doing or a
Yeah.
movie. Um, but yeah, man, yeah, Holmes is interesting, very interesting guy. And they hung him. What was the year? I'm just looking again. He's not one that I know as much about as the others. Was it 1895?
Yeah, it was a while ago. It was even before my time, if you can believe that.
um, apprehended 1894. Where the hell is that death date? 1896. Okay, I was
Yeah,
close.
they didn't wait around a long time in those days.
Nope, they hung him. They hung Mr. Mudgett, Herman Webster Mudgett, being his real name.
Right.
So, yep.
You know, out of all of the people that we have covered on this show this past year, there is probably only one guy that I feel any real sympathy for,
Which
and
one was
that's
that?
Kemper.
Yeah,
He's a guy
yeah,
that I think growing up in other circumstances probably wouldn't have been a killer.
probably. I mean, his IQ was exceptionally high too, and man, that treatment by his mother though is what just totally screwed him up, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was a sociable guy, very talkative. He was awkward with girls, which is, every guy thinks they're the only ones, right?
Absolutely, it's
They,
a curse we bear alone.
right, right. When actually it's everybody. It just seems like you're the only one. Um,
Hmm.
I think Kemper could have had a very different life under other circumstances, and I think
Yeah.
and I, his relationship with his mother was so horrendously, awfully bad um, that
Hmm.
it just pushed him to commit crimes that you know might not have happened in other circumstances.
Um.
On the other hand, he was in fact one of the first people the FBI's um, um,
They went to when they're developing the profiling methodology.
exactly, and he was very
The
talkative and very open about it.
BSU.
Yeah, and
Yep.
one of the things that Kemper mentioned, and I don't have this quote in the slideshow, I should have, but he actually talks about how his difficulty forming relationships with women and girls, you know, frustrated him. Um, it wasn't the factor, but it added to. the
Hmm.
direction that he went because he didn't know how to figure that out.
No, I mean he didn't. And he really didn't at all with stuff like that. And he also had psych training that they gave him when he was in the mental hospital after killing his parents at, I think it was age 15. Kemper showed enough attitude that they actually trained him on how to do a lot of the diagnostic testing for them in there. So that, I think, was part of it. But look at the crime that he was most known for when he killed his mother, beheaded her, raped the head, and then sat it on the thing above the fireplace and basically screamed at it for hours before throwing her vocal cords down the garbage disposal.
Yeah,
I think he also played
nothing,
darts
nothing
with it.
symbolic there. Jesus.
Uh, yeah, and to respond to Timothy with the sympathy part of that, I agree with you to a certain degree there. But with somebody like Kemper, I think it's exceptionally clear the path from him being relatively normal to killing women.
Yeah.
We pretty much knew this was going to happen because of how brutal his mother was.
You take
Um,
it,
it-
and you can contrast that with a guy like Bundy, who had a very good upbringing, very normal upbringing, a very loving mother, and he ended up murdering lots of women.
yeah, yeah.
If you had put Kemper in Bundy's household growing up, there's a good chance he might have done none of that.
Adjusted well, yeah. I agree. I absolutely agree. Although there is actually another one that
And
I
and
do
and
feel a
just to be
little bit of
clear,
sympathy for, but
this is not excusing anything.
no, not at all. Not at all.
You know, you do what you do and you pay the price for your actions. That's absolute, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to own
It's not
that.
an excuse. It's not a justification. But it
Not at
I
all.
with this guy, I think it's unfortunate how how he was raised and what he had to deal with growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I fully agree with you on Kemper. Um, although I was disappointed though, because he was one that I wrote on our writing project and I hadn't heard back.
Oh,
But
that's too
I
bad.
imagine, I imagine after Mindhunter, which that photo that we have up is from, that
Right?
he's probably getting a shitload of mail because of Cameron Britton, who played him in the series and
Man,
played
does
him
he
very
do
well.
and he does such a good job. I mean, he looks the part too.
Right, right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was perfect, and he's as tall as Kemper was too, if I'm not mistaken. Is like what 6'8"
Yeah, I mean, six
at his
seven, I
height?
thought, but big guy, big fucking guy.
Yeah, yeah, really, I mean, a huge dude. But if it got to feeling sorry for any of them, there's one where I do feel a little bit sorry
Oh
that
yeah?
he's in there now, and that is a surprising one to me. Charles Tex Watson.
I thought you might be going there next.
Of the Manson murders, the only one, the only male who was on scene from the Manson family at the Tate murders and the LaBiancas. And I feel bad there because Tex was one that I've actually been corresponding with. We've traded, I think, 3 letters so far, but
How's that
he was
going?
only pretty good. I'm still waiting on his answers to the questions I sent him, but that's all that we really have is time
Yeah,
with
right.
that. But Tex, he was a 19-year-old football star, an A student from Texas, and then he just got disaffected with his family one day, and he said basically, "Fuck you, I'm gonna go to California," and that's where he gets preyed upon
Hey, hold on,
by the
hold on one
intersection.
second.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
there's text today.
now you were kind of cutting out, and I want to see whose deal that is.
Oh,
All right, you sound better
oh,
now.
I heard it now. Oh, now you're cutting out on my end.
Uh-oh.
That's strange. Oh, wait, now, how's that now? Can you hear me?
No, it's still kind of icky. All right, let's just muddle on through it.
I think that's random noises. Uh-oh. You there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I don't hear you at all, Wes. Can you hear me?
Just a second. I got an idea.
Oh, now you're good.
Oh, okay. There we go. It must have been something with my internet.
Okay.
Sorry about that, all who are listening there. But yeah, getting back to it, Tex saying that he basically, like I said, he was a football star. He's a smart guy. He's an A student in high school. And then one day, just for whatever reason, he ends up getting a little disaffected, having a fight with his mom and dad, and says, "Screw you guys, I'm going to California." And that's where Manson got his claws into him. And
Yeah,
cue the
and and Manson was a brainwasher. He was adept
oh,
at that.
absolutely.
And so you can't really there's um people don't have the same level of, I don't know, responsibility, I think, when they fall under the spell of a uh, somebody who's adept at brainwashing.
Yes, absolutely. And to be clear there, he didn't just use subtle psychological techniques like mirroring to brainwash them. He would use hardcore drugs, controlling it that way. He would use sex to brainwash them, both the men and the women. So it wasn't just like he was a talker. It's just he was very manipulative as a talker on top of all of that. And yeah, Tex. Oh, yeah, absolutely, Timothy. Tex does regret his part in those murders very much, and I think he might be one of the few who is genuinely reformed through something like that. He is, and I don't just say that because he's religious and he has a ministry behind the jailhouse now, but just the way that he communicates with me, he's been so gracious about everything. He won't let me send him money to pay for postage, even,
Which others
and
have
stuff like
requested.
that. Yes, and that's not, I didn't think that was unreasonable when they do request it.
Right, because
In fact, I've said,
yeah. I mean, postage, that's not a big burden of an expense.
no, not at all. And you give them a little bit of money and it can go a long way with
Yeah.
stuff in there. Um, But yeah, and he seems to me to be about the only one, I think, who is genuinely reformed. Because you figure he's been in there for 50 years
Yeah.
by now, too.
Yeah.
From 1969, man.
And if
You know?
he was not a sociopath to begin with, which it doesn't seem like he was.
I don't think Tex was.
Right. Yeah. So
I
so
don't.
everybody else that we talk about here was already a sociopath when they were born. Um, but Tex was not. And the only reason that he was a criminal at all was because he fell under the influence of Manson and his techniques and drugs and influence.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, Timothy, I don't. I don't believe that he does think he deserves to be. He's had parole hearings, but he hasn't really said much about let me out at them. I mean, he knows that he has to pay for this sin. So yeah, I mean, I think he is genuinely reformed, Tex Watson. And to answer Kelly's question, as far as I know, no, he hasn't been hurt while in prison. And I could definitely ask him if you like, but as far as I know, no, he hasn't been. So, I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But
So we have we, and by we I mean you, have letters from him, but he that's me writing on your
Mhm.
the coattails of your efforts. Um, but we
No,
don't
not at
really
all.
have a lot of new insights yet.
No, not quite yet. And the letters are pretty short, too. He likes to do fairly short notes with a lot of it. Um, let's see. The first one here that I got from him, pretty short. Dear Wes, this is September 18th, 2019. Thanks for your letters. Send me your questions and I'll see if I can get, trying to read his answer, I'll see if I can answer them for an interview. By the way, aboundinglove.org, his ministry, is written by me alone. So you can go there to see Tex's own words too, except for a few areas where I acknowledge it. Beloved Charles Tex Watson.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be, like I said, waiting on those. Although, as I told him in those letters, no pressure to get him out the door any time soon. It's not like it's on a deadline. Just when it feels natural, go ahead and answer it if you like.
In the comments, Timothy brings up prison rape and how that's a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And we actually have not covered that very thoroughly on the show because we talk about mostly about people before they end up in the prison system.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah, we haven't done much on that.
it's I agree that it's an egregious um, crime that is never prosecuted ever. And the
Yeah, I
fact that it
agree as
happens
well.
against men is what allows it to continue.
Yes. And
And the,
even looking at,
and,
sex crimes in the bigger society with men, they don't report them.
right.
And I imagine, yeah, like what you're saying.
And you add in that they're criminal men,
Hmm.
and nobody cares. Nobody gives a fucking shit about it. And so it continues unabated.
It's
And the
sad.
prison systems don't care to get involved.
Hmm.
And
No,
I think it's outrageous. And
I do too.
I
It's
don't have any
sad.
idea what to do about it except to not be so fucking apathetic towards it.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is to reforming that either, but, that's the first step, like you said, is talking about it, bringing the awareness to it. Which reminds me, another thing we can kind of segue into, and we haven't done shows on either of these guys, but this is a story that I told you, SK,
Yeah?
when I was at our company Christmas party here in where I live,
Yeah?
about my second cousin who I was talking with at this, and he actually worked in the Illinois prison system for a long time. And one of the things that he was a big part of was this squad that's basically like a SWAT team. And they would go to the different prisons all around this area of the country and put down riots as they happened.
Okay.
But the other thing that he was telling me when we were sitting down at the party, he was a guard up at Joliet right
Oh,
before John Wayne Gacy and Richard Speck were executed. Well, before Speck died, because he wasn't executed there. He died of a heart attack. But yeah, so he guarded both of those guys.
Really?
He said Gacy was pretty pleasant, just sort of a doddering old guy in his final days in prison. Which
Yeah,
we need to do an episode on him.
we have not done him yet. He was the clown killer. He was the guy that um, dressed up like a clown. He was a very sociable person who was known in the community and fairly well liked, and everybody thought was, a little bit off, but nothing really, too much.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the pillar of the community, as some called him.
Right.
But with Richard Speck, Mark, my cousin, had a really interesting story there. This was the guy who killed 6 nurses in Chicago in 1966 in a night of terror. If you watch Mindhunter, you might know him as the interview where he takes a baby bird and throws it into the fan. It's
Oh,
that
okay.
guy.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that I never knew about him is that he transitioned to a woman behind bars.
No kidding.
Yeah.
At state expense, no doubt.
Oh yeah.
Does,
He never seemed like the type to me that would do that.
was he
Not
trying to get
saying
transferred to a women's prison?
I'm honestly not totally sure on the reasons there. I'm gonna have to do some deeper digging, but anyway, after the operation, Mark and a few of the other guards went in and on orders to toss Speck's cell to look for things like contraband.
Right.
So they did that. He said they found an ass load of contraband in there. I mean, everything from drugs to more telling, I think, and more interesting pornography that Speck shot of himself. Evidently, somebody brought in a Polaroid
Wow.
camera. Yeah. So, but talking with Mark there, he says that it really wasn't that surprising because there was more than a few guards in there who were essentially swayed by Speck's infamy so much that they would do that sort of thing for him and smuggle it in. So
Well,
that is
they
the
might have made a few dollars off of it themselves.
oh, I'm sure, definitely, but yeah, and he says, when you look at prisons, it's crooked or stupid guards who are the main source of contraband that gets in.
Well, it kind of has to be that way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how else is it going to happen?
Yep. Yeah, I mean the other ways of shoving it up your ass or what have you.
Yeah, but that's
It's
small
hard to do.
potatoes. Yeah, it takes a lot of people coming in and out to do that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Although I guess another way it could be done when it gets more coordinated is through the prison gang system. No matter which one you're looking at,
But you still have to cross that barrier
somehow.
somehow.
Yeah. But I would imagine those gangs grease the gears too when
Yeah,
they need to.
grease or threaten or both.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you have the Florida man who said was found with drugs up his ass. And he goes, "Those aren't mine."
Oh yeah, the guy who cocaine blew in his car.
No, no,
Like, oh
no.
yeah,
There
the
was
wind
no. There
blew
was
it in
one that,
there.
yeah, not the car, but actually being processed into jail and was found
Oh.
with drugs up his ass and said, "Those aren't mine."
Oh, that was kind of like the woman who had the cocaine in her vagina too, and she
Yeah.
said the same thing. It's not my coke. Oh man.
Oh my God. I'd ask what you're on, but I think we know.
But yeah, man. And who was that? Wasn't that Gear Dreary who wanted to be a guest when we do Gacy? I think we need to get him on with that too.
Yeah, let's do that. We got to do Gacy. We put him off long enough.
Well, and we should do Spec too, but yeah, Gacy first, definitely. And then even going off of Gacy, there's the Chicago Ripper crew, who they were, I think, they might have been some who worked with Gacy. They were somehow tied with him, but they were like a little satanic enclave. They killed a good amount of people in Chicago after he did. So it's kind of a complimentary show
Okay.
to the Gacy show when we do them. Um, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. That was just as fascinating talking to him about all that. So, Mark is one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet too. Always makes me laugh.
Oh, that's cool. Is if
Have
you
to have
can
a
go
sense
through
of
if you can
humor.
go through a job like that and keep a sense of humor, that's pretty awesome.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Timothy, how about Rob Zombie as a guest? Keep dreaming,
Yeah,
but
right. If that could be
I,
arranged, we will absolutely do it.
oh yeah, I would love to talk to him about especially his Halloween movies.
If you have never seen the Rob Zombie interview where he talks about directing CSI Miami, you gotta find that because it is the funniest shit ever. Because he,
Wow,
he he directed one of the episodes.
dang, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Uh,
So there were a couple of topics that we covered where I had a personal connection.
there were definitely. Well, why don't we remind people about those a little bit?
So chronologically, the first one would be Ted.
Yes.
And you know what's interesting is all you have to do is say Ted, and everybody knows exactly who you're talking about.
Hey, you should just change it like Madonna, one word. But you have Madonna, Sting, and you have Ted.
Yeah. And
Prince.
for those who didn't listen to that show or don't recall, I happened to be at Lake Sammamish State Park the very weekend where Ted abducted two women on the same day,
You were.
which happens to be just a couple of miles from where I'm sitting at this moment.
Wow. Hey man, this just is fascinating. What year was that again? That was 1970?
That would have been 73, I want to say 73, 72 or 73.
Okay, I'm a little bit early there.
Um,
Um,
I mean, he started before that. The Lake Sammamish cases were about 6 months into his spree, abduction and murder spree in the Seattle area, which started at the University of Washington.
hmm
Um, so this would have been the summer following that. Um,
Wow.
and
Yeah, he is just so endlessly fascinating.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm not sorry he's dead. I'm not at all sorry that he was executed. At the same time, he had a high entertainment value. Um,
hmm He
and
really did.
when he wasn't actually murdering people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's part of why I find him so fascinating too is I don't think any of these guys were a bigger social chameleon than Ted Bundy, to be honest.
Yeah. Some of the guys mostly that we've talked about have had girlfriends and wives A lot of them did not. A lot of them had very difficult relations with the opposite sex. Um,
Oh yeah.
Ted had girlfriends. He was never married, but he had several girlfriends. Primarily one that kind of set his type. He had a very beautiful, driven, dynamic, capable woman as a girlfriend in college, and then she
Hmm.
broke up with him, and all of his victims after that fit the pattern of Diane.
Down to the part in the hair too.
Yeah.
It's just wow. It's just amazing. But I mean, he's definitely hands down one of the smarter ones too.
Well,
Just
he
expressed in a
was
different way than Kemper.
right. He was Kemper never really pursued his education. Um,
No.
Bundy was accepted into two different law schools. He never finished, but he was accepted and he at least attended some classes. And he was he fooled a lot of people, a lot of people. I mean,
Hmm.
the kind of kind of created the Anne Rule basically created the true crime genre from her book about him, The Stranger Beside Me, or something like that. From her
Hmm.
time working on the suicide hotline, sitting literally next to Ted Bundy.
Oh yeah. I mean, she had a lot to do with that, most definitely. But technically, what created that genre was another show that we did, In Cold Blood, Truman Capote. But we don't
Right.
have to switch to that one. I was just thinking of that.
I also happened to be in Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains, just a few miles away from hiking on a school outing
Hmm.
the very weekend that he escaped from jail in Grand Junction.
Wow. Yeah, and that was out of that was the one where he jumped from the second story of the courthouse, right?
Yes.
Because there are multiple escapes with
There
Ted.
was a later escape when he had a vent in his cell and he starved himself to where he could fit through it.
Hmm.
And then you know what's interesting is nobody's talking about what happened once he got through the vent, how he got out of the prison from that point. I've never seen anybody detailing that information, and maybe they just don't want
Really?
it known.
That could be, man.
But they said,
Yeah.
yeah, he fit through this vent, and then poof, he's out. And in Wisconsin, I think it
Hmm.
was to go to a football game. He stole,
Yeah, with Michigan State.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he stole some credit cards and took a flight to there, and then a bus and train to Florida. And
Uh,
he, now this is a guy we talk about making mistakes.
hmm.
Um, he got arrested both times that he was arrested was because of his fucking driving.
Forget about the old lady driving stereotypes. We'll bring out the Ted Bundy
The
driving
but they
stereotypes.
the sheriff in Florida said that if he was a better driver, he'd have still been a free man.
Oh yeah.
He
Yeah,
was
Timothy,
that
they caught
bad.
him and they killed him. What year was he executed? Man, I have to check that too.
I don't
So I
recall.
can't remember. But yeah, I mean Bundy, he almost got into a bar fight when he was up there in Wisconsin watching that football game. And then he decided I need to go to a warmer climate because of course he's surviving outside,
Right.
basically. So he heads for Florida. But like you were saying with the ventilation escape, the other detail that stuck out in my mind with him was how he trained himself for jumping out of that second-story window.
Right. Yeah, he did that in his jail cell by jumping off the upper bunk of his cell.
Yep, until his muscles were built up and his bones could take it,
And
jumping
he
out
still
that
sprained his
height.
ankle in the effort of getting out.
Wow.
And that was made possible because he was his own lawyer.
Uh-huh.
His escape in Grand Junction, he was he had a lawyer in Utah, and he was convicted. One of the very few women who ever got away from him was in
Uh-huh.
Utah, and he was convicted of attempted, kidnapping and assault,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was then tried in Colorado for a couple of murders. And then once he got to Colorado, he decided he was, lawyers are idiots except for him because he's got that kind of ego.
Uh-huh.
And that's how he was able to escape because was given access to the law library at the courthouse.
Yep. And
And
he
he,
had studied a bit of it under as an undergraduate, although his major was psychology.
right, but he had
Bundy's
been
was.
accepted to um, Pacific Lutheran University's law school in Tacoma, and also Utah State University's law school. And he attended some classes in both places, although I don't think he finished a full year. But he
Mm.
obviously thought he was the smartest guy in the room all the time. He had a
Oh
huge
yeah.
ego. And
Yeah, and that
so,
just uh-huh.
and that's why he, fired his lawyers and defended himself both in Colorado and in Florida.
Yep, he did. Timothy, what he said in the comments there, yeah, that's the impulse thing. It kind of made me think about that. You combine it with the college efforts of some of these guys, that that's a huge trait of psychopathy, is being unable to really focus on something for a long period of time. You're very look, a squirrel, look, a shiny object, with stuff like that. You're very ADHD
You
almost.
you know, Bundy might be the only one we talked about all year that had any college graduation degree at all.
Yeah, I think so.
It's really rare amongst serial killers to be able to, as you say, concentrate and work on socially acceptable efforts for 4 years. Um,
Yep.
Plenty of them have high IQs, but they rarely exhibit the kind of focus required to complete a degree.
Yep. I mean, that's a trait again of psychopathy. Psychopaths more generally too have that tendency to not really focus, like we said. Which Bundy was definitely one of those. But and
Yeah.
I think most of them that we profiled are one of those. But um, yeah, you talk about education
Yeah.
and getting back to the letters a little bit here. I received another one from a guy that we haven't talked about yet, but he fits into the angel of death category of serial killer.
Yeah.
This is medical personnel,
Oh, yeah.
usually,
Yeah.
who will kill their patients. And this guy, Dr. Michael Swango, is from my hometown where I live.
No
So,
kidding.
yeah, it's really interesting getting a letter back from him And I was just opening that up a little bit. Like I said, we haven't talked about him yet, but we will definitely get to him. He may be responsible for up to 60 dead bodies
Wow.
on on both this continent and going over to Africa.
Th-
Um,
that's that's on par with one that we have talked about, which is Dr. Oh shit, now it's gone from my head all of a sudden, just like that.
is it?
Oh Jesus.
Have we
The
really touched on an angel of death?
the
I didn't
doctor
think we
yeah,
had.
the doctor in Yorkshire. Um God damn it. Kelly, help me out.
Shipman?
Shipman, Jesus.
I didn't think we did a show on Shipman
Oh,
yet.
oh, maybe we haven't. I
I
think
don't
we've
think we have. So remember, we were talking for a little while about possibly grouping them together.
Oh, that might have been it.
Um, but
So,
yeah,
hey, yeah, I had a pen pal for a long time, and I'm still in touch with her, but from the time I was in like eighth grade, with at the time a girl in who lived in the same area as Shipman. Um, Fortunately,
oh well.
nobody that she knew had any dealings with him,
Uh
and
huh.
was only aware of him after the fact.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and with Swango, that's sort of the same thing with me and my family around here. He went to the same high school as my dad did. Was
Wow.
actually valedictorian of his class. But yeah, he gets into it a bit on this letter. Dear Wes, and this is the 9th of October. If you wanted to get my attention, a Quincy IL address and postmark is certainly the way to do it. This will be a much shorter letter than is my norm. Skipping ahead a bit, remarkably, I have only received a handful of letters from Quincy and Adams County over the years, and none with the interest and specific questions of yours. He's been in there since, I believe it was 1996. He
Wow.
is the only one we've written to in a federal prison as well, out there in Florence, Colorado. Same place that houses the Unabomber, by the way.
I don't know the name. I don't know that town, Florence. I gotta look that up.
I can't say I know much about it either. But yeah, and with the second letter I sent him, I actually got a notice back that they had to redact part of it.
Oh,
It was from, well, it wasn't from the letter itself. It was from one of the articles I wrote that I sent him. I probably forgot to get rid of the crime scene picture in it. So
oh,
they just had to pitch that.
oh, that's right by Canyon City, which
Oh.
so Canyon City used to, or maybe still does hold the men's prison and the women's prison, which guess what? I have a connection to.
Uh huh.
I when I was in high school,
Wow.
about the time that I had that was, in the mountains with Bundy, we didn't actually meet up, but so we did
Mm-hmm.
a field trip down to Canyon City to take a tour of the men's maximum security prison.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, when we arrived, the prison was in lockdown because of a riot.
Wow.
And so the teachers did an ad hoc, impromptu call over to the women's prison and got us a tour over there. And I
Oh
gotta tell
dang.
you, from the so we were parked in the parking lot of the men's prison at Canyon City, and that was a scary fucking place just from the outside. You know Shawshank, right? The
Oh,
movie Shawshank.
absolutely.
This
Yeah.
I would have rather gone to Shawshank.
Oh wow.
any day than this place.
Dang.
It was this, this block stone building with these. It was old, and the windows were open, and you could hear all the rioting going on, and it was crazy as shit. And then we go over to the women's prison, just a short bus ride away, because we were in school buses. And it was like a college fucking dormitory by comparison. I'm not kidding. One woman to a cell. They had doors, not bars, and with little windows in them, and they had TVs and pictures and books and paintings and all kinds of shit. And the woman who conducted our group through the tour was in there for murder.
Dang. I had to do that. My aunt actually worked at a women's prison too. She did like plays that they would put on. She was in charge of that as part of their
Ah,
rehabilitation, I guess you could call it. But one thing that really stuck out, that's Swango up there now, yeah.
yeah,
One thing that really stuck out to me about this letter, it sort of blew me away. I called him Doctor throughout the
yeah,
entire first letter I sent him, thinking maybe that's going to, stroke the ego a little
right,
bit, help him to open up and answer what I want him to answer.
yeah.
When he writes back, he says, "Please call me Michael if you are comfortable with that. Thank you," in reference to it, which I thought was kind of weird. I didn't know what to make of that part. Um, but we'll have to see where it goes with him, because the other thing that he wanted me to do, and I just have to make sure that I'm not breaking any laws if I did do it,
Right.
is send him a couple of obituaries on people in this area that he wanted.
Oh,
So, and that's what I
that's
that's what
kind
I
of
told
weird.
him. Well, you got to figure he's lost track with a lot of people
Okay.
being in there as long as he has. And I honestly don't have a problem doing it as long as all I get him is a little bit of, public domain information that would be in a newspaper, like an obit. Um, but like I said, the only thing that's stopping me from doing it right now is I need to find out if it's legal first, because he is
Right.
in a federal prison. And I obviously don't want to get in trouble, and I don't want to get him into further trouble either. So that's what I told him. But I just need to find a lawyer and ask them what they would say about that being legal. Uh, Kelly, yeah, they do screen all mail going in and out
Absolutely.
of both the state prisons and the federal prisons. Although I was surprised, the federals seem to be a little bit more lax on that stuff than the state ones I've written. So, but yeah, I mean, definitely.
Who else have you gotten letters from?
David Berkowitz, the son of Sam,
Oh,
he
Berkowitz. What a fucker.
is a lying sack of shit. He would have been interesting
That's
too.
that's the thing. I'm gonna pull him up now. That's the thing about Berkowitz is um, people just fell for his bullshit
Mm-hmm.
left and right, and
Uh,
and and he actually, even though he actually admitted that he made shit up just for attention and to fuck with the cops,
mm-hmm.
the whole Son of Sam angle was just bullshit.
Oh yeah, and like you said, he admitted that. And he was, I think, a compulsive liar. Just horrible with that. And he's another one who says that I'm of God now. I found Jesus and all of that. But frankly, I don't
Nah,
believe him.
no, that's just more of his bullshit.
Yeah,
He's
and
he. You'd think the parole boards would be, tired of that bullshit.
Hmm.
the turning to God shit, but they don't. They seem to keep lapping it up.
Oh yeah, I mean they do. I don't know why either, but um, he says, "Dear Mr. Hawbrick, I am in receipt of your letter. Thank you for the invitation to correspond, but I wish to pass on this for now. If I ever change my mind, I will let you know." In your letter, you mentioned samples of other projects you did. There was nothing in the envelope other than your letter. All incoming correspondence for every inmate is routinely opened and examined. So I assume that whatever you tried to include was not permitted, but thank you anyway. With that, I actually realized I had forgotten to tuck it in his letter after
Oh,
I sent it. So I resent everything to him, just said, "I apologize for that, David. Here's what I meant to send." Um, he says, "Nowadays, everything I feel compelled to share, I do via my typewriter and via the website that is owned and overseen by friends, ariseandshine.org. You are always welcome to refer to any of my journal entries or other things that are on the site or linked to it. I must have at least 2,000 pages of prison writings by now, all of which can be viewed easily. My writings come from my heart, and I am thankful for the chance to share my thoughts with the general public. The site is popular with students who have to do reports as part of their courses in psychology, criminology, sociology, etc. Presently, I work as a clerk for the prison's chaplain. Take care and God bless you." P.S. No donations will be accepted. I'm not sure what that is. Again, if you're donating to the prison
right.
ministry, that's what they'd have to subsist on. Whatever, David.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for letting me know anyway, dude. That part I did appreciate.
Yeah. Son of Sam was, you know, uh, there were a lot of serial killers in the 70s for some reason.
Hmm.
I've never seen anybody try to explain why things peaked so sharply in the 70s. I mean, there was a ramp up in the 50s and 60s, but the 70s were just insane. And it spilled
Yeah,
over into the 80s.
it
Um,
did. I
and
wonder if that didn't have more to do with the media changing
it
at
might
that time.
have. I mean the we television had been around plenty. Newspapers had always been around. Radio had been around for decades.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
but it could have been the attitude and what the media wanted to cover. Um, but
Yeah.
still, there was, you can't blame the media on a guy like, you know, Berkowitz
Berkowitz.
or Bundy
Yeah.
or those kind of guys, because they were out there doing their shit, and then the media hyped it up.
Hmm.
Um,
Uh,
but
yeah.
these handful of fuckers
Hmm.
really changed society with their actions, with their murders.
Oh, absolutely. And they most definitely did. And Berkowitz did that by, causing a summer of fear in New York City. But to answer Kelly's question in the chat, I was just looking for the copy of my
That's a good
prospecting
question.
letter of the. It was a. I mean, I was just looking for the copy of the prospecting letters I was using, but they're not on this computer. They're on jump drives at my office. But essentially, what it was is just introducing my background and then asking some questions, some basic questions like, man, I'm trying to remember what I asked him. It might come to me, but it was just basic stuff. Like when you get into the duos, I wrote two, and in fact, one of those, which we could, I guess, get to now if you want to pull his picture up, SK. It's Lawrence Bittaker. This
On
is
it.
one that we this is one that we have not done a show on yet.
Right.
But he and his buddy, Roy Norris, who I also wrote to and also got a response from, although his was considerably less courteous. He called me Mr. Media, which I can't exactly blame him for distrusting the media that come to him. But whatever, with him. Man, it's weird. I'm having issues opening my PDF document of Bittaker's letter. But these guys were known as the Toolbox Killers, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris. And they killed their 5 victims with implements from a toolbox. One of the big ones was stabbing them in both ears with an ice pick and then stepping on it and breaking it. But the other thing that they're most famous for is making a couple of audio tapes of their torture sessions and killing sessions. And in fact, the FBI uses these tapes right now to desensitize their agents to the
What?
horror in the field. Yeah. They make the, like in Mindhunter, they had a scene with that. I don't know if you remember where Holden is in the classroom
Right.
with that kid who has headphones on and he's sitting at the table. That's what he's listening to, is Bittaker and Norris's tape of this girl dying
Wow.
as they torture her in their van. But yeah, Bittaker, when I wrote him, said, Wes, thank you for your inquiry. Received 11/14/19. He says, you shouldn't lump all prisons together. SQ, San Quentin, has no restriction on the number of pages in our incoming or outgoing letters. Nor is there a limit on receiving stamps, except that the max allowed is 40. Now, one question I had of Bittaker was if he had heard of Samuel Little, who had been in the news for getting the most amount of kills on record for an American killer. He says, I never heard of Sam Little, and true crime never interested me. And no, I've never received a marriage proposal. That's one I've actually been asking all of them after a good friend was intrigued about that, whether they were receiving those while behind bars. Um, Indeed, Bittaker says, I currently have no regular correspondence. You should always ask an inmate if it's okay to send money, and my answer for now is please don't. Feel free to ask any questions you may have. Whether I answer them depends on various factors, especially the length of the response, as I'm sick and really don't like to write. And he says in parentheses, nothing contagious. Um, as for the questions in your letter, 1, who killed whom? See elsewhere in this letter. 3 and 4, where I asked him how he thought that the partner dynamic changed things. He says, most certainly, I wouldn't have become involved in any such crimes if it
Hmm.
weren't for Norris,
Wow.
which I thought it was shitty with Norris because he basically threw Bittaker totally under the bus and said that he did everything. That Norris's hands were clean is basically what Norris said in his letter. But I
Really?
thought Bittaker's response there was more honest, where he says, I never would have been involved in it. He didn't
Yeah.
say I didn't do it.
Right.
Let's see.
And we've covered
If you,
actually along those lines. We've covered a number of cases of duos where that was
yes.
definitely the case for one of them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely with a few of them. But one last interesting thing there with Bittaker's letter that SK pointed out to me, it may very well be the last one he ever wrote. Because the guy died, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Not very long after
So,
you got that letter. So, and not being one of the, if I can use the word famous or popular serial killers, he might not get a lot of correspondence, so you may very well have the last letter he ever wrote.
Yeah, I mean, especially as well where he says, I don't like to write, and I'm sick when he typed that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it may very well be. But yeah, while we're talking, I had said I was going to post that graphic on our Facebook page, and I had kept forgetting to do that. So I will do it while we're talking here. Which one was your favorite duo that we've covered?
You know, I'm really partial to, and I don't have any of the pictures for this, but Fred and Rose West.
They were different, man.
They were,
Definitely.
I mean, they were a seriously scary couple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the psychologists who have interviewed Rose have said that she would not have been a murderer without Fred. But at the same time, she was absolutely in, involved in abduction and torture and sexual assault. So
Mm-hmm.
she, you know, and she always maintained that she never committed any of the murders. But this was a couple who murdered their own fucking daughter because she threatened to tell the authorities what was going on.
That was the only show that I wasn't on, I think, besides the one where I was sick that we did this
Yeah,
past year. Because that was your very first one, wasn't it?
it might have
Fred and
been.
Rose West?
Yeah,
I
one of
think
the lost
so.
episodes.
So we should redo it
Yeah, those.
along with those others.
Yeah, and they had they. This is a couple who I should take Bittaker off of their pictures.
Yeah.
Um, this was a couple who would, when they wanted to get their other kids to behave, they would say, you know, you don't want to end up under the roses like your sister.
Wow. Man, that's just a level of depraved,
And
breathtaking.
there was plenty of evidence of incest from the father and the mother. And the mother apparently, although she was pretty hideous, apparently she would occasionally make some side money from prostitution.
Oh,
But
wow.
the one of the real um, dangers with serial killer couples is that it's disarming to the victims when
Oh,
there's
I
a
think we.
woman.
Oh,
So
yeah. I think we definitely saw that with Ian Brady and Myra Hindley,
absolutely,
especially. Yeah. Where they actually worked it into their MO. Her femininity and, being disarming, I guess you could say.
absolutely.
Yep. Yep. Paul Bernardo was another one. And then, of course, you get into one that sort of ties into last week's show that we did with Mr. Willis Morgan. Um, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole were technically a couple.
Yeah, have you seen there's a Netflix documentary series on Lucas called The Confession Killer,
I
which
need to watch that.
which is
Yeah.
fascinating because they kind of come to the conclusion that maybe Lucas didn't kill anybody, that he was just total bullshit.
Really?
Yeah,
I could definitely believe it with him.
that he was, you know, he was, getting um, so much attention from the cops and being, you know, driven and flown around all over the country, and FBI and Rangers and marshals and sheriffs and all these people coming in giving him attention. That he
Star
just
treatment, man.
starred
Yep.
treatment, and he was just like, yeah, sure, I did that one. Sure, I did that one. And then they find out, well, if he did all of this, he would have had to travel, 3,000 miles in 2 days.
Wow,
Crisscrossing, literally crisscrossing the country back and forth.
dang. Yeah, I mean they were very interesting, but yeah, I think that perspective on Dahmer being the one who killed Walsh to be really interesting too. And one that like I said on the show, it sold me the more that I looked into it.
Yeah, I remember we had the discussions between us prior to that. It was like, oh my God, this is going to be some loopy conspiracy theory bullshit. And yet it turned out the guy had solid documentation to back up his claims.
Absolutely. And he's not the only one either that thinks that.
You see Kelly's comment.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, Empress Wu. Okay, fine.
Eh, Empress Wu.
Yes, Kelly, Empress Wu may have been the most prolific serial killer in history.
Perhaps.
Possibly. She was definitely interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
And Kelly happened to be on that show. What a coincidence.
Empress Wu. Oh man, my connection must be weird because it's loading weird. It's buffering.
Uh-oh.
A little slow tonight. But
We need to get Kelly on the show again, find something for her to do. Maybe
yeah,
talk about those weirdo Canadians.
I thought I had one in mind that we were gonna do with her, and I can't remember what it was now. Damn it! Oh, I know. It was Gilles de Rais. I think that's how you say it. The guy who fought with Joan of Arc and was
Ah,
supposedly a pedophile serial killer. I
I don't
probably
know that
butchered
guy.
his name, Kelly, but it's Gilles Day Rais.
Gil. Guy. It could be Guy
He, I
for
have no idea.
Jesus.
I don't speak French,
Fucking
but
French, man. Nobody takes more letters to spell one sound than the French.
this is very true. Wow, man. I was just looking to see about a body count with him. Oh, they're saying approximately 140,
Wow.
somewhere around there. Yeah, that letter is up on the Facebook site now.
Kelly was also around when we did Bathory, and I think when we talked about
Jack the
Vlad
Ripper,
and Jack and
the
Rasputin
Poisoners.
and
Yeah,
Poisoners
Rasputin.
and Lolari. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Dead Man. We have talked about medieval serial killers. The problem is there's a lack of documentation for most of them.
Yeah, that is a big issue. Although, like I said, I think DeRay would be interesting. Did we do one on Vlad? I didn't think we did Vlad yet.
Didn't we? I
I
thought
didn't
we.
think so.
Yes,
No, we
Kelly, we did
did.
Picton. You missed it.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, you might not have been listening or in the chat for that one, Kelly, but we
It
did
was
do
very
Picton.
recent.
Maybe 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, man,
Here, I'm going to throw up a picture here of one of the most, uh, one of the sickest fucks of all the sick fucks that we've talked about.
Vlad the Impala. I didn't know. I didn't know. Is that a new model of Chevy, Kelly?
Yeah, yeah. Wait till you see this guy, man, because we just kind of ran out of words to describe this asshole,
Oh yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
Albert Fish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your rat's nest of mental illness and psychopathy was probably the best descriptor for Fish
Yeah,
that I've ever heard.
it, it just, I mean, the list of perversions that this guy indulged in just never stopped.
How many did we come up with in total? I thought it was like
Jesus,
43
yeah, it was
distinct paraphilias.
a huge. I mean, he was a fucking encyclopedia.
Hmm. He really was. And we still have quite a lot we could have talked about with him. And man, it, I mean, he was uncommonly brutal, Kelly. The wanker doesn't even begin to
No,
describe.
Wanker is kind of that. Yeah, that's pretty soft pedaling. I mean,
To remind, he
Heydrich would
is.
have been aghast at the shit this guy pulled.
Oh yeah, and I mean, his most infamous crime was taking a 11-year-old girl, torturing her, eating her, and then sending a detailed letter to her family about what he did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Can I don't know anybody else who did wrote a fucking letter to the victim's parents after the fact.
Yeah,
That is a level of cruelty that is just unmatched.
the only other one that comes to my mind with that was Otis Toole writing John Walsh
Yeah.
after all of that, which that gets into actually one of Fish's paraphilias, which is scatologia, which is essentially getting off on sending obscene letters through the mail, or you have like telephone scatologia is also recognized. You get people who call and just, breathe, and you might hear sex sounds on the other line. And, I wonder if that isn't evolving. Did you see that news blip with the Ring doorbell that was hacked? The camera that was
Yeah.
hacked inside the
Right.
house,
Yeah.
and they played.
By the way, as a PSA, do not buy anything that's Ring or Nest, and do not let your family or anybody in your family use that shit. It is so easily hacked. The security is just uh, tissue thin.
Yeah, absolutely. And this guy, he hacked it, and there was a 10-year-old girl in her room when this happened, and he played Tiny Tim's "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" really loud through it.
Fuck.
I don't know if probably a lot of horror enthusiasts in the chat, but that's the song that was made famous in Insidious. It was played throughout that movie. I don't know if people remember that, but he did that, and then he just started shouting the N word for
Wow.
whatever reason. And I wonder if that isn't a new type of scatologia that we'll be seeing with a little bit of sadism and cruelty intertwined. But well, Kelly, you heard the Albert Fish episode, didn't you? She said you wanted to get in that brain. You should if you haven't heard it. And the
Oh,
C word, I don't even know if that's doing it
that is
justice.
so understated for fish. Jesus, they're just we you got to invent new words for fish because and doctors literally did invent new
Yes.
words to describe the shit that fish indulged in because there were no
Yeah.
words before.
Oh yeah. And he is just profoundly, profoundly disturbed on every single level. Let's not forget the hallucinations that he was Christ
Yeah.
that he had too.
And he had a family, another one who had a family. You know, you kind of think of serial killers as loners, and it's not true. It's not, I mean,
Yeah, not all of them are.
sometimes yes, but you can't use that as a determining factor. A lot of these guys have families.
They do, man. Albert Fish was one of them. And that may have been part of what made him crack when his, I don't know what you would call her, just his bitch of a wife ran out on him with the
With the kids.
local. I think that, well, no, not with the kids. They left the kids with
Oh,
him.
right, right.
She left him with, and went to basically, they described him as the local derelict. The guy is, low IQ, couldn't handle a job
Right.
and all this stuff. The guy that she ran off with. But, Fish, and he had a pretty wide geographic spread too. He told
Because he
the
was an
cops,
itinerant worker.
yep,
He was
he
a
was a
house
house
paint.
painter.
Right.
That would take him all over. And he once told the detectives, Detective Kelly of the NYPD, that they thought he molested at least 2 boys in every state that he was in, which would have been upwards of 30 states. And then, of course, he had much, much, much more um, in certain areas where he spent more time, like Manhattan was one on the map. And then another one close to me, St. Louis, he spent a lot of time in too. That's actually one place where he almost got caught after a 5-day long marathon sadomasochistic sex session that went horribly, horribly wrong with the youth that he found on the street.
Yeah.
I guess Fish also had a penchant for castration, and I guess that's what he partially did to this youth down in St. Louis.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. He. This was a guy who. Yeah, he should have been in a hospital. Um,
Yes.
but he was very cunning, and he was not caught.
Oh, yes.
Um, hey, I want to talk about another guy that you've written to. A guy from Wichita.
Oh, of course. Bill Thomas Kilman in the flesh, man. That is his
BTK.
alias, by the way, Bill Thomas Kilman. Dennis Rader. I still need to write back to him, too. I hadn't yet. Getting a little,
So,
I,
there's kind of a joke about having the penmanship of a serial killer. Well, this guy does.
yes. Yes, and you can see that with, or did you put the letters on our slideshow?
I
So you
didn't.
can see that at our page.
Yeah, you can
I
see him
put,
on the Real Monsters page. That it's like it's like it takes Bletchley Park level of decoding to read his handwriting.
yeah, yeah, and just the level of this neurosis about control that you can see from his letter is astounding because there's arrows all over to notes on it, and yeah, it looks like something that needs to be decoded. You can
Yeah,
see a
cryptic notes in the margins, and little codes around the top and stuff. At first, I thought, is this something that the prison system has added to the letters? But no, he did this shit.
yes, he did, and yeah, and it's fascinating. He also sent a drawing that he did. He does a lot of art in his cell, and his method is actually very interesting. What he will do is look at the reflections in the polished concrete floor and then that's how he gets the inspiration to
Hmm,
draw what he draws. It's
interesting.
essentially a surrealist method, something like Salvador Dali would have did with critical paranoia, is what he called it, where he would purposely try to induce, visions to do his art off of.
It's not especially obvious, but Mindhunters has had some scenes of Raider, just little clips, um, vignettes
He
almost of Raider, but they don't say who it is.
he's only credited as ADT repairman.
Yeah,
Yet, which Raider was.
right. And
And
it's kind of frustrating because it's like, where's this gonna go? You know, how's this setup gonna pay off?
mhm, yeah, absolutely.
I'm
It's it'd
hoping
be
hoping that they have additional seasons for this show and we get to see more.
They haven't renewed it yet, to my knowledge, but I have no doubt that they will. It'd be with its popularity and being as it's David Fincher behind it. You can't say no to that, man.
Yeah. I have concerns about the viability of Netflix going forward, but hopefully that they will find a way to survive and continue to make some new shows. They some of the shows that Netflix does are pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, some of them really are. Even if they were to somehow go under, I would see some other service picking up Mindhunters
Yeah.
if that were the case, just outright buying it. Um, yeah, I mean, Dennis Rader, man, he was the president of his local church. He was a dog catcher. He was another one considered a pillar of his community with a wife and children. And he would break into houses and, just like the moniker says, bind, torture, and kill the women and sometimes the whole family. His first crime was a whole family with the Oteros in Wichita, Kansas in 1974, where his youngest victim was Josephine Otero. Age, I think she was 12,
Yeah.
13 maybe at the time. And he, Rader was one that he didn't get caught until, and this is one thing I mentioned in my letter to him, is that one of the reasons that I find true crime so fascinating was watching your open confession in court when I was 18 in 2005. That's
Yeah.
where he, got out there and he allocated to his crimes. He got those several life sentences that
Was that
we
to avoid the death penalty? Because that's what Ridgway did.
I can't. I'm gonna have to look that up whether Kansas has the death penalty or not. See, he's at the El Dorado, Kansas facility.
Yeah, because Ridgway did. That's what Ridgway did. In order, he he confessed and pled guilty to avoid a trial and to avoid the death penalty.
Mm-hmm. He did. At man, what the heck? Sorry, computer's acting a little weird, but yeah, the way that Raider got caught, and this to me was kind of you could call it an epic level of stupid. He was going to put he was going to put some writings on a diskette for the police.
Yeah, that was I mean, come on, dude.
Yeah. And he just straight up asked them if
Ask the
I were in a
police. He asked the fucking
yes,
police if they
in a
could
letter.
if they could
He
trace
asked them in a
the
letter.
disc.
And of course they said, "No, we can't do that,
No,
Mr. Bill Thomas
no
Gilman."
way.
And then lo and behold, when they find the disc, it says on there that this was put together by a Dennis Rader at Christ Lutheran Church.
Well, to be fair, in a sense, they didn't lie because it wasn't the disk itself, it was the metadata on the Word document that he used.
Well, that's true. That is most definitely true. Uh, wow.
God. All right,
Oh,
one
yes,
more.
Kansas does still have the lethal injection. Okay. I
One
wasn't
more that I
sure.
have a personal connection to. The Green River Killer.
Good old Gary.
Gary
That
frickin'
old
Ridgway.
Gary.
Um, so Gary Ridgway lived just a few miles from where I grew up, and literally across Interstate 5 from where my next older brother lives right now and has lived for a very long time. Um, Ridgway worked for PACCAR, and I've known people who have worked for PACCAR. I knew people at the time who worked at PACCAR. Um,
Hmm.
he,
Wow.
I was, I'm very familiar with all the areas where he used as dump sites, and in fact, the closest we got to it. So one day we were up at Mountain View Cemetery in Auburn, Washington, for the graveside service for my wife at the time, her aunt, when police started showing up literally across the street from the cemetery
Wow.
and in droves while we're holding this graveside service. And we find out later that they were retrieving the remains of one of Ridgway's victims, although we didn't know it was Ridgway.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our family friends who was a county sheriff worked on the task force for a while.
Wow. Dang. And man, he must have had a shitload of dump sites too.
Yes, his range was uh, pretty wide, um, including well, this is the kind of asshole shithead fucktard that Ridgway was. He took a nephew camping down to Oregon with the dead body of a hooker in the back of the goddamn pickup.
Sheesh.
He was
Man.
going down for some reason he decided that this one needed to be disposed of in Oregon.
I
And
wonder why.
I don't know. Just the one that they know of, just the one. And he took his nephew with him for I mean, as cover, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I'd assume so.
and this is one of the things that freaked out the rest of the family even more was that he said it went to investigators when he was caught. They asked him about that and if, what would he have killed his nephew if the nephew discovered the body in the back of the pickup? And he said, probably.
Dang. Man, and he's another one, you wouldn't really know it by just looking at him that he is that cold of a bastard.
Yeah, and this is another guy he was married 3 times.
Yep. Kids too, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Um, if he had if he had lived on the other side of Interstate 5 on the west side instead of the east side, he would have been in my school district. His kids.
Wow. Man, just to think how those things stack up and one little change like that.
Yeah. And
Dang.
we may be able to get the one of the prosecutors of Ridgeway on the show in the future. She has actually agreed to do the show. I just have not managed to follow up on that.
I've got a few that I need to follow up with too for guests for the new year. Um, once we get into that, to be really interesting too. I don't know if anybody in the chat has watched. Nobody saw a thing on the Sundance Channel about a murder witnessed by 60 people. 60 people. And no one says they saw a thing.
Which, that's not the New York.
No, this is Missouri, a small
Okay.
town in Missouri. And I actually added the main historian that they had on that show, Diane Fanning, and she has agreed to be on the show too. But we just haven't nailed down a date yet. So
Because the God damn it, I gotta look it up. The one that oh God, New York stabbing witness.
oh wait, oh I know who you're thinking of. It's the one where they coined the bystander effect, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. What was the name of that one? That's gonna
Kitty
bug me.
Genovese. Thank
There
you.
we go. Yes.
This, by the way, that whole concept is total journalist bullshit. Um, there were witnesses. They did act. They did call. They did do things. Um, it was not anything the way the New York Times painted it.
Wow.
It was total journalistic bullshit.
Dang. Man. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, with this one, the killing of Ken Rex McElroy, it's so interesting. The guy was basically the town bully, and they did it. But
Oh, is it the
it's
one
also not
where
the
it's
only weird thing that happened in this small town either. And we'll get into
yeah,
all that
yeah,
through
yeah.
that show.
It's funny. I think Criminal Minds did an episode that kind of mimicked this, where they it turned out that like so many people were involved that they couldn't pin it on anybody.
Wow. Yeah, they probably did do something like that because it was huge news back in the 80s when this happened. Um, let's see. Here's one from 2010 from the New York Times about it. I'll put it in the chat. And hopefully it's not a fucking paywall. That's been driving me nuts with the
Uh,
New York Times when I try to bring up stories. It's all in a paywall. But one way to get around that, actually, that I use is you use a couple different internet browsers and just put it in a different one, and it'll let you read it. So, yep. Ken Rex McElroy. Headline: Town mute for 30 years about a bully's killing.
yeah, according to the Criminal Minds episode, that there was like a bunch of people who decided that they enough was enough, and they all kind of got together, and a few people committed the murder, and while a whole bunch of other people stood on, and they did it on purpose that way because they didn't want any one person taking the fall for it.
Mm-hmm. That's likely what happened here too, I imagine.
Yeah,
Although I suspect with it you might get a deathbed confession from somebody.
maybe.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Uh,
Well, this has been a fascinating year with this podcast and working with you. Quite frankly, when I first asked you, I thought it would just be a guest thing, and it just worked
mm-hmm.
out that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I kept having you back, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah, it has. And likewise on all points.
We've
It's a
had some
lot of fun.
fascinating discussions and some interesting guests, and
We
and it's a
have.
topic we will never run out of subjects for.
No, we won't on that, man. Which I'm thinking, we still have actually all the notes that I have for David Parker Ray, the Toy Box Killer, for next week if we want to do
Yeah,
that. As the
sounds good.
first one of 2020, I guess. So, yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds good.
It's been a hell of a lot of fun so far.
Well, thanks
Really
for being
enjoy
with
it.
me on this year, and let's go another year. Let's see what the hell happens.
That sounds like a plan, man. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
All right. Good night,
All right.
everybody.
Night, all.